Welcome to Walking the Haftarah. I'm Tyler Merwin, and this is Torah Portion VAYAK'HEL. This week's portion is Exodus 35:1 through 38:20. The Haftarah this week is 1 Kings 7:13 through 26. VAYAK'HEL means, and he assembled, and as in the opening portion of our Torah portion, it says, Moses assembled all the congregation of the people of Israel and said to them, These are the things that Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh has commanded you to do. Exodus 35:1. During non-leap years, this week's portion will be part one of a double portion with next week's portion, Pekudei. This week's Torah and Haftarah portions will compare and contrast the construction of the Mishkan, which is the tabernacle, and the Beit HaMikdash, which is the temple. So let's go over this week's Torah portion. Adonai begins by reiterating the Shabbat and the prohibition to kindle a fire. Fire was still used on Shabbat for light and heat, but the fire was to be built or kindled before the Sabbath and was simply kept burning. But even though there was a fire, it was still not to be used to cook or for any other work. There's also a spiritual aspect of this. We should avoid arguments, fighting, and ill will towards others, as this is a type of fire in that regard. This day is holy, and even if there is strife, it should be set aside to focus on the Holy One and Yeshua, the true light of the world. Next, Moses tells the assembly to bring the contribution of all the materials that we needed to build the Mishkan and the priestly garments. Let every skillful craftsman among you come and make all that Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh has commanded. Exodus 35:10. This was truly a team effort. Everyone was in Echad. Then all the congregation of the people of Israel departed from the presence of Moses. And they came, everyone whose heart stirred him, and everyone whose spirit moved him, and brought Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh's contribution to be used for the tent of meeting, and for all its service, and for the holy garments. Exodus 35:20 and 21. Those who had any skill in crafting was contributing with their labor and their skill to be a part of constructing a dwelling place for the Most High. Even those who didn't have any physical skills in this regard were still able to be a part by their contributions of material that were needed for the work. No one was left out who had a heart to serve Adonai in this effort. This reminds me a lot of when we first started going to our assembly, River Life Tabernacle. At the time when we first started to attend, our current sanctuary was only a slab. Most of it, I'd say 80 to 90% of it, was actually built by the hands of those who went there. So I was able, and my family was able, to be a part of do hands-on work with framing, hanging sheetrock, doing a lot of work, a lot of the finished stuff, all the really stuff you need to get right, like finishing drywall. Some of that was hired out, but most of the main work was actually done by our hands and feet. And the feeling that that gives you about being really a part of, like you really are invested, not only that you're giving monetarily or bringing your parts to the tabernacle, but actually putting your own blood, sweat, and tears into it, really does help to build that echad. Those with a willing heart, both men and women, brought their free will offerings to Moses to be used in the building of the Mishkan. Then Moses said to the people of Israel, See, Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh has called by name Bezalel, the son of Uri, son of Hur, of the tribe of Judah, and he has filled him with the Spirit of God, with skill, with intelligence, with knowledge, and with all craftsmanship. Exodus 35:30 and 31. Rabbi Foreman at Olive Beta brings forth some really interesting connections in this verse related to Bezalel that I want to cover with you now. First, one of Adonai's titles is that of Creator, as that's how we're actually introduced to him in Genesis 1, as he creates our entire universe in 7 days. Man was made in his image, and as such, we are also, in a sense, little creators. Granted that he creates something out of nothing, something that we cannot do, but we do create many things in this physical realm. If we look, a lot of God's creatures actually do create, awesome looking webs or nests and all kinds of things that are very creative. But we create all kinds of things, from building to art to music to you name it. So we truly are in his image. And that is Bezalel's role, to be the chief human creator, providing chief oversight of the tabernacle construction. This is similar to a general contractor in a building project. If you're not familiar, if you're usually building a house or building something, you're usually going to find a general contractor. That general contractor has knowledge in all of the skills and all of the aspects. He understands about the electrician part. He understands about the plumbing part. He understands about the framing part. He understands the drywall. But he doesn't necessarily do all that himself. He oversees his subcontractors that handle all that work, but he makes sure that everybody's doing everything to the proper degree, that they're putting the proper skills, and everything's going in the proper timing. So his name Bezalel means shadow of God, or image of God, you could say. So we can see here the connection to Adam in the sixth day of creation, being created in the image of God. Our text tells us that he is also the son of Uri. Uri means fiery, but it actually comes from the root word or, which means light. Or is the first thing created in the day one of creation, the light that was created before the sun, the moon, and the stars. So Bezalel, the image of God, came from Uri or the light of day one in creation, which was called good or Tov. So now let's look at his grandfather, who is Hur. Hur means whole. So what is a whole? Or better yet, what's inside of a hole? Now, a hole, we can think of a hole in the ground, but we also use a hole as a euphemism for a lot of things. You say that, there's a hole in your argument. What does that mean? It means that there's something missing. There's a void. There's a gap. There is a nothingness, maybe a darkness and emptiness. Or you could say that it was without form or void. That could also be kind of a picture of a hole. And also, of course, speaks back to day one of creation. This was the state of the earth at the beginning of day one in the creation story. So from the nothingness, the Hur or hole, came forth light, which is Uri or, that eventually produced the image of God, Bezalel, the little creator, in day 6. But what actually happened in the creation? What was that really all about? Adonai himself decided to make a space in his world or realm, whatever you want to call where he existed or where he was before our universe was created. But he made a space in this place for us, mankind. He doesn't need us, but he desired to have creatures that had free will that would willingly choose to follow and to worship him. So he made a space in his space to create the heavens and the earth, which is what we need to survive and to thrive. He made room for us in his world. So what exactly is the tabernacle and later the temple in light of this? It's mankind's making a physical, holy space in our world for him, for Adonai. By following his instructions, this will be a space where the big creator can physically dwell with us, his little creators. So Bezalel, the picture of Adam, Adonai's original little creator, is reciprocating God's gift of creation by creating a space in our world for God. There's one last piece of this. What tribe is Bezalel from? He's from the tribe of Yehuda, or Judah. Yehuda means to give thanks or praise. So by building the Mishkan and later the temple, we give thanks or praise to our Creator by making a physical space and place for him in our world and in our lives. Now let's get back to the portion. The people were bringing all the various materials that were needed for the construction of the tabernacle morning after morning. All the craftsmen who were doing every sort of task on the sanctuary came, each from his task that he was doing, and said to Moses, the people bring much more than enough for doing the work that Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh has commanded us to do. So Moses gave command, and the word was proclaimed throughout the camp. Let no man or woman do anything more for the contribution for the sanctuary. So the people were restrained from bringing, for the material that they had was sufficient to do all the work and more. Exodus 36, 4-7. The people had such a heart of giving and a sense of echad at this point that they had to be restrained from their giving because the need was already met. The first thing listed as being made were the curtains and the cover that served as a roof for the sanctuary. Then he made the upright frames for the tabernacle of acacia wood, Exodus 36:20. Next are the structural frames made of acacia wood overlaid with gold, along with the bases and tenons that connected them together. This is followed by the partitions that separate the holy place from the Holy of Holies, and then the screen that is served as the entry point into the holy place from the courtyard. Bezalel made the ark of acacia wood. 2 cubits and a half was its length, 1 cubit and a half its breadth, and 1 cubit and a half its height. And he overlaid it with pure gold inside and outside, and made a molding of gold all around it. Exodus 37, 1-2. Next, the ark is constructed, along with its cover, the mercy seat. He also made the table of acacia wood. 2 cubits was its length, 1 cubit its breadth, and 1 cubit and a half its height. Exodus 37:10. Next we have the table that will hold the bread of the presence. He also made the lampstand of pure gold. He made the lampstand of hammered work, its base, its stem, its cups, its calyxes, and its flowers were of one piece with it. Exodus 37:17. And then the menorah to bring light into the sanctuary. He made the altar of incense of acacia wood. Its length was 1 cubit, and its breadth was 1 cubit. It was square, and 2 cubits was its height. Its horns were of one piece with it. Exodus 37:25. Then the last piece of furniture within the sanctuary, the golden altar of incense. Remember a few portions back when we were given the design of all these items? The order of these items started at the heart, beginning with the Ark of the Covenant, and then all the pieces that work its way outward. Remember, it started with the Ark, then the table, then the menorah, all these things that were inside the sanctuary, and they slowly started to describe everything kind of from the inside going out. But here, in the actual building of the Mishkan, it takes on a more practical order. We begin by building the structure of the sanctuary with its curtains, walls, roof, and partitions. Then the holy items, the ark, the table, the menorah, and the incense altar are made. As soon as these holy items were made, there was already a place built and dedicated for them to be placed. He made the altar of burnt offering of acacia wood. 5 cubits was its length, and 5 cubits its breadth. It was square, and 3 cubits was its height. Exodus 38:1. Up next was the sacrificial altar. He made the basin of bronze and its stand of bronze from the mirrors of the ministering women who ministered in the entrance of the tent of meeting. Exodus 38:8. Then the bronze or copper laver was constructed from the women donating their copper mirrors for the work. So the copper mirror at the time, a personal mirror, was copper or bronze flat metal piece that was highly polished and would be a personal mirror. So these were all donated and dedicated to build the laver. So bronze, copper, we've talked about that before. They're very similar metals. Copper is actually a pure metal, but bronze would be a material that's mostly metal. It's actually an alloy of about 88% copper and most of the rest of it is tin or other metals. Bronze actually is a stronger metal that would handle more weight than actually pure copper itself. But how it's related back in the time, your translation may say one or the other. But you get the idea that they're very similar in their makeup. The portion ends with the construction of the courtyard around their tabernacle and the screen gate entrance to the courtyard. And this brings us to our Haftarah this week, again in Melachim 1, or 1 Kings. This week in chapter 7, verses 13 through 26, which deals with some of the construction of the temple. And King Solomon sent and brought Hiram from Tyre. He was the son of a widow of the tribe of Naphtali, and his father was a man of Tyre, a worker in bronze. He was full of wisdom, understanding, and skill for making any work in bronze. He came to King Solomon and did all his work. 1 Kings 7:13 and 14. Now this is not the Hiram, the king of Tyre, that we've read about in other Torah portions, but a Hebrew artisan that lived in Tyre that had the same name. His parents are thought to be from the tribes of Naphtali and Dan, but that they lived in Tyre, so he was called the man of Tyre. The text says that he was full of wisdom, understanding, and skill. Another tie to our Torah portion that also describes Bezalel. He cast 2 pillars of bronze. 18 cubits was the height of one pillar, and the line of 12 cubits measured its circumference. It was hollow, and its thickness was 4 fingers. The second pillar was the same. He also made 2 capitals of cast bronze to set upon the tops of the pillars. The height of the one capital was 5 cubits, and the height of the other capital was 5 cubits. There were lattices of checker work and wreaths of chain work for the capitals on the tops of the pillars, a lattice for one capital and a lattice for the other capital. Likewise, he made pomegranates in 2 rows around the one lattice work to cover the capital that was on top of the pillar, and he did the same with the other capital. Now the capitals that were on the tops of the pillars in the vestibule were of lily work, 4 cubits. The capitals were on the 2 pillars and also above the rounded projection which was beside the lattice work. There were 200 pomegranates in 2 rows all around, and so with the other capital. He set up the pillars at the vestibule of the temple. He set up the pillar on the south and called its name Yachin, and he set up the pillar on the north and called its name Boaz. And on the tops of the pillars was lily work. Thus the work of the pillars was finished. Verses 15 through 22. These pillars were somewhere between 27 and 36 feet high. The pillars were named Yachin, which means to be established, and Boaz, which means strength is within it, alluding to the temple being firmly established with divine strength. Then he made the sea of cast metal. It was round 10 cubits from brim to brim, and 5 cubits high, and a line of 30 cubits measured its circumference. Under its brim were gourds for 10 cubits, compassing the sea all around. The gourds were in 2 rows, cast with it when it was cast. It stood on 12 oxen, 3 facing north, 3 facing west, 3 facing south, and 3 facing east. The sea was set on them, and all their rear parts were inward. Its thickness was a handbreadth, and its brim was made like the brim of a cup, like a flower of a lily. It held 2,000 baths. Verses 23 through 26. The sea is the equivalent to the tabernacle's laver, the bronze or copper vessel of water used by the priests to wash their hands and feet before entering the temple to serve Adonai. The biggest difference was the sheer size. It was 18 to 20 foot rim to rim and 9 to 10 feet tall, and its walls were a handbreadth or about 6 inches thick. It was thought to have held somewhere between 13,500 to 24,000 gallons of water. We can see why it was referred to as the sea. We see that both our Torah portion and Haftarah deal with creation that was done by a little creator. So let us, as little creators, reciprocate the love shown by our Master Creator and Yeshua, our Messiah. Let us build adequate space in our daily lives for Him so that He can dwell with us and speak to us and speak into our lives. It's only by doing this that we can truly be effective in the calling that He has placed on us in this world today. I pray that this teaching has been edifying. Let's lift up the name of the Holy One with love and echad. Shalom.